think we kick it off. So good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on the topic of AS/NZS 3000 2018 Amendments webinar, proudly brought to you by Middy's Electrical. My name is Jessica Zyden. I'm the communications lead at Middy's, and today I'll be moderating the webinar. This webinar is being recorded, and you will receive an email in the coming days with a video link, should you wish to share with your team or watch again at a later date. Before we get started, I'd just like to cover off a few housekeeping rules. Your lines have been muted to avoid background noise. If at any point you have a question, please simply type it into the Q&A box down the bottom of your screen, and we'll get to as many as possible at the end of the presentation at our designated Q&A session. If you have the same question as someone else, please feel free to upvote it and we'll do our best to make it a priority. I'm very pleased to announce and welcome our guest speakers, Gary Busbridge, Chair of EL-001, Roy Sands, Victorian Licensed Electrical Inspector and Committee Member of EL-001, and Keith van der Zyden, Audit Manager at Energy Safe Victoria and Committee Member of EL-001. Without further delay, I'd like to now pass over to Roy Sands to commence the presentation.
Thank you, Jess. Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the seminar. Thanks to Middy for giving me the opportunity to be one of the presenters today. I'd just like to start off on a very quick one. The fact that we decided to put a definition of accessibility created a couple of problems within the document itself, and one of them was the clause 1.5.3.1, where we've had to change it to say that something can be accessible providing it's with the use of a key or tool. So on to the next slide, thank you.
Hi, this is me, Gary Busbridge here, and same thing. It's good to be able to get some information out to the industry on this Amendment 2. One of the most important things we've got to consider is nowadays we have a lot of DC waveform in the system in regard to solar. You've got your solar systems, you've got electronic fridges, you've got your TVs, and all of these have got a DC component in there. And what we found is that the general type of RCD that we are recommending at the moment is a type AC, and that type AC is really only reliable on AC waveform faults, and it may pick up DC, but it may not. So now we're going to make type A RCDs, which are for both AC and DC waveforms, so we can pick up any earth fault that may occur in both alternating current and direct current. And so what we've done is those red words there is what we've added in to explain why we're bringing in type A RCDs. And if we move on, yes. So what we've done is we've made a few changes within the clauses as written there, 2.6. What we've added in there is that it should be for residual, sinusoidal, alternating current and residual pulsating direct current. And also we've added an implementation date. So this allows 24 months for suppliers and manufacturers to change over to type AC RCDs from type A. And I'm pretty happy to say that in general, I think if you're going to Middy's, certainly most of the suppliers will already be type AC, type A RCDs. So you have 24 months to get that right. So that's the implementation period. And the next one, yes. Okay, this is to do with RCDs in multiple residential installations. We've had a lot of queries about where's the demarcation in an apartment building, a block of units, almost hotels type accommodation, when you're talking about application of an RCD. So in domestic or residential, we're talking about 30 milliamp RCDs on all final subcircuits. When you're talking about industrial, it's only covers final subcircuits up to and including 32 amp. And also within that, there's a number of exceptions that can be applied. I think there's 6 of those that can be applied. So what we've had to do is we provided some sort of demarcation. So we put in that exception in red to say that if you have equipment that is not located or supplied from any residential living unit, so that's a lift, central air conditioning plants, fire system, drainage pumps, that sort of thing, if it's not supplying any socket outlets, then what you do is you apply the industrial or non-residential rule. If it supplies a residential installation within that complex, it may be the swimming pool area or a common sports area or a barbecue area, well then that comes under the residential. So we tried now to give a decent demarcation between residential and non-residential in those apartment type complexes. Next one. In regard to alterations for installations and replacements within this, we've actually changed and added under alterations the option if you install a lighting point or electrical equipment within and you're actually altering the circuit, then you shall install that RCD to protect that circuit at the origin of the final subcircuit, so at the switchboard. Up till now, there was an option to actually add your RCD protection at the starting point of the alteration to the final subcircuit. And that is a little bit crazy if you think about it, because we're effectively allowing you to put a socket outlet RCD behind a piece of furniture or a curtain to provide protection for the new part of the circuit. So what we've decided is that we should be protecting the old part of the circuit as well as the new part of the circuit with RCD. And then just within that, you'll notice that it's got alarms in red there. It did say smoke detectors, and it's actually smoke alarms. Okay, so if we can move on from there. And as far as repairs go, we've had to add in a bit to the clause about luminaires or lighting points. So if you have an existing luminaire that may be direct connected, so it could be connected directly to the fixed installation, whenever you replace that, so you're going from a halogen to an LED downlight, for instance, they've now got a plug and socket on them to make it easier for assembly. So at that direct connection, you'd actually have to connect in a plug base, have a socket outlet in the ceiling to connect that. So if you do add a socket outlet, it doesn't mean you have to go back and change the circuit to have an RCD. So that's what that the red addition is. So if you've got a lighting point and you actually have to put a socket outlet in the ceiling to plug in that lighting point, or it may be also an exhaust fan or the like, you don't have to go back to the RCD, to the switchboard and add an RCD. And again, we've had to change that smoke alarms terminology from smoke detectors. So we can move on from that.
Sorry, just Keith. One second. Sorry, Keith. Just to the, we've had 150 people join in since we first started. So I just will give a quick reminder to those that missed the start. This is being recorded and will be made available to you in the coming days via email. So, and just with the questions as well, great to see them flowing through. We'll reserve those until the official Q&A at the end, of which we'll start to get through them. Sorry, Keith, for interrupting, but over to you.
Thanks very much, Jess. I don't know whether I'm up yet or not. I can only see your face there at the moment.
You're up.
Okay. Well, thank you very much, Jess, for this. Look, I'm doing switchboards, and if you look at clause 210.2.2, it's been totally rewritten to provide clarity on the intent of the clause. It's been split up into 3 parts now rather than 1. So you've got switchboards, switchboard rooms, and switchboard doors, and switchboard covers and doors. So we'll go into that. So we delete the whole clause and replace it. I'll move on, and if you have a look at it, we've got an exemption in there. In a domestic electrical installation, the 1 metre distance may be reduced to 6 mil from the face of the switchboard. That was part of the clause. It is now an exemption. So we'll move on. So now we go to switchboard rooms. The clause was rewritten again. So where a switchboard is rated at 800 amps or greater per phase, or is more than 3 metres in length, switchboard rooms or similar enclosed spaces housing the switchboard. That's the key. It's not just a switchboard room. It's anything that houses a switchboard. So we had a lot of conjecture about, look, this switchboard room houses telecom racking. It's all other bits and pieces. It's not dedicated to a switchboard, so it's not a switchboard room. Well, it definitely is. It houses a switchboard, and that's the key in this particular part of it. Okay. We've had a lot of issues in regards to the size of doorways into switchboard rooms. So we've had to do there. Openings or doorways to the switchboard room shall have an unobstructed height of not less than 2 metres and an unobstructed width of not less than 900. That's been reduced in line with the NCC. So we've still got the recommendation there, though, that you do have the door heights at 2.2 metres, because switchboards can be built to 2.1 metres high. So if the builder doesn't have a builder of that a doorway of that size, you may not get your switchboard in. We do have an exemption there, though. The requirement need not apply when replacing the existing switchboard in the same location with a switchboard of the same or lesser rating, just like a repair. That's really what it comes down to. Next slide. So switchboard doors is covered. That's been rewritten as well, and it does not apply. Oops, hang on. Next slide. Sorry, Jess. I do apologise.
No worries.
We just covered that one. Okay. The doors of switchboards and switchboard cupboards that open into passageways or narrow access ways, there's an exemption for domestic electrical installations there, so you don't have to do that with domestics. Next slide, please. Suitability of switchboards. Right, that's a big one. What we've done is the 61439, AS/NZS 61439 replaces AS/NZS 3439 series. It's now not relevant. It's been superseded. 3439 has been superseded. And what we've got there is a requirement now to follow 61439, but however, both standards can be used. I'll go to the next slide, please. Right, okay. Okay, switchboards shall comply with 3439 series or 3439 series if both of the following exist. This is all new, by the way. The total of the connected load at the point where the switchboard is installed exceeds 125 amps RMS per phase, or B, the prospective short circuit current at the incoming terminals of the switchboard is greater than 10 kA RMS. We delete the notes and replace the following under AS/NZS 61439 series. Switchboards equal to or greater than 10 kA RMS short circuit withstand current are not required to be independently verified, type tested as complete assemblies, but instead may be assembled using standard verified type tested components. Verification of compliance is achieved largely by assessment, relying on component certification, including adherence to the manufacturer's instructions. Appendix K contains guidance on verification of switchboard. Appendix K hasn't been modified or amended. All the information is in there. And Appendix K 2.3 covers testing, and K3 is application. We've had a lot of correspondence from switchboard builders, etc., about this. And one of the members of the committee has spent a lot of time working with switchboard builders as to verification of switchboards, and the fact that 3439 and 61439 currently are both okay. And if the switchboard is tested to 3439, it will be okay for as per 61439. Next slide, please. And that's Roy.
Okay, thanks, Keith. That's a lot of information there, a lot to digest. I'm sure there'll be a lot of questions generated from that.
Yeah.
Okay, moving right along. We had some confusion within the industry regarding lift cabling. Some people call the lift cabling running up and down the lift shaft as installation wiring. Some people called it the equipment wiring. And there was a bit of an issue in relation to them using 2.5 conductors and then paralleling them up as they needed to extend the length of them. So we've taken the easy option, and we've said that now any conductor under 4 mil associated with lift equipment can be paralleled. 2.5s can be. Thanks. Next slide. Thank you. Okay, exception rewritten to provide better clarity. There's always been an exception that you can use half the circuit breaker size when calculating your voltage drop with relation to distributed loads along a circuit. Well, we discovered that people were assuming that that meant they had to be evenly distributed. So every 2 meters I had a socket outlet. That was never the intent. So we've rewritten it in red to make it clearer that now, providing that they are spread along the circuit, you can actually apply the half the circuit breaker rating for the voltage drop for the current rating. Next slide, thank you. What we've here is a very simple and nice, easy one. Once again, our editors are Australian standards, wonderful people. However, they've forgotten OR at the end of the actual clauses. So one's been put in, as you can see in red on the bottom. It wasn't an and, it's not an if or a maybe or a could, it is an or. So it's A or B. Thank you. Can I have the next slide? Thank you. Okay, as Gary mentioned before, we throughout the document have removed or amended the fire detector or smoke detector clause. A smoke detector usually sends a signal to a fire alarm panel. That was never the intent of the clauses. The clauses were that there were smoke alarms as you have in your home, and in many situations around in commercial and non-residential situations where we actually referred to the smoke alarm itself. So a smoke alarm is a self-contained unit that'll actually go off, and it's been modified now. So we now include smoke alarms and the smoke detectors that feed back into the board. Next slide, please. Okay, a lot of people, Gary mentioned the 413 or the socket outlet in the ceiling. Believe it or not, we had a lot of electricians that thought that was a good way to go, put one in the middle of a ceiling space and then plug in all the E-pods, the electrical portable outlet devices that you buy from your local wholesaler or Woolworths store, and plug it in, then plug as many lights as you like in. We had a big issue with this, so the committee thought about it for a long time, referenced back to the appropriate standards, and realised that they're only permitted to be used where they're readily accessible. So what we've done is included that now as part of the wiring rules. And the bit in red is extremely important. That shall not be used to connect equipment wiring to insulation while location is not readily accessible. And hidden up on top of the ceiling, on top of the ceiling of in your roof space, not deemed to be readily accessible. So they are no longer permitted. More work for the electrician. Good job. Okay, can I have the next slide, please? So in line with that, once we introduced a reference to other standards, we have a requirement then to actually include it within the appendix. So remember, our Appendix A is reference documents because we reference these 3 new standards in relation to not being able to use EPODs or the manufacturing of EPODs in those portable outlet devices. We've had to include it into Appendix A. Next slide, please. Okay, very simple one. We got the wrong figure. Our apologies. We actually reference a different figure in there. So you can see that in the middle of the slide, it references the now figure, which is now correct. So that's about all for that one. Nice and easy. Thank you. Move to the next slide.
Yes, this is an interesting one, Roy. And it's really just catching up with some old terminologies and trying to make it a bit clearer about areas of communal baths and showers. We all know sports clubs have them, change rooms, they're community or communal, used by a number of people. And we had there was an X5 requirement for the equipment that went into communal baths and showers. The confusion was caused by that reference because it sort of tended to say, well, it's the whole area. And actually, it's about the zones within the area, not the whole communal bath or shower area. It's about those zones, zone 0, zone 1, zone 2, zone 3, and so on. So what we actually did was we've deleted this IPX5 in communal baths and showers. So when you go in to do your next installation at a sports club, it's about following these different zones in section 6 damp areas, and you follow those, and that's all you need to follow. So it's not about a whole change room having to be IPX5. So we've deleted that reference to communal baths and showers. If we go on to the next, the same thing here under the table 6.1, which had that reference to the type of equipment you need and what IP rating you need to have. So we've deleted one of the footnotes which reference the communal baths and showers. So quite important, just remember it's about zones. And so it always, no matter where you are, you look at the zone 0, zone 1, zone 2, and that's how you fit your accessories within that. Okay, next. Okay, what we've done in this clause 7.3, there were specific examples that were used to reference the fact that you need an isolating switch that shall not be capable of being overridden by a programmable control system or the like. And what we've done in the exception is we referred to that standard 4509 part 1 is standalone PV systems, and 4777 is inverters for PV systems. So what we've done is we've just replaced it, that those requirements about being overridden by control systems for isolating switches is actually can be varied by other related standards. So we've just taken the specifics so that people don't see it as just aimed at PV. It's aimed at a whole lot of other standards as well. So we've just tidied that exception up. Next one.
Thanks, Gary. The tag team's going rather well. Okay, don't panic, people. There's a lot of stuff on your screen, but all we've done here, we've taken these drawings straight out of AS NZS 3010, which is the generating standard. The modifications to the ones within 3000s were only to bring it in line with 3010, in particular, the symbols being used. So the principles have remained the same. The drawings basically have remained exactly the same. It's just that we've finally got our symbols right with their little crosses and our zeros. So don't panic, all's good. Next slide, please. Okay, we've had a lot of things thought about making it mandatory to record results when you go and do a job. You know, did I do an IR test on the mains? Did I do an IR test on my PN conductor, etc.? And what was the value? We thought about it a lot in the committee, and we could only come up with a recommendation. So the bit in red is where we've really hitting home and has recommended the results of the tests, especially tests require a value for verification to be recorded and maintained. Good idea. You probably take some photos with your camera these days of the job you finished, take a couple of sheets and take pictures of them too and file it all away. You never know when the regulator's going to come knocking and say, what results did you get? Once again, recommended only. Thank you. Next slide. Oh, the good old one you can really blame Roy for. Polarity and circuit testing. Okay, how can you have an incorrect or reverse polarity, as it's commonly called, if you don't get your connections wrong? Had me confused for quite a while. So I won the committee over, and what we've done is actually combined two of the tests. So now when somebody stands in front of you and says, how many mandatory tests? You don't say 6 anymore, you go 5. Good answer. Okay, so we've amalgamated the correct circuit connections and polarity into one. Next slide, please. Okay, so what we've basically done is A to D of our polarity have remained exactly as they were. And then we've taken the E and F notations or clauses from the correct circuit connections and place them in with the polarity. And the title now is Polarity and Correct Circuit Connections, which to me makes a lot of sense. Hope it does to you. Next slide, please. So as a result, the results now and come down to being for polarity and correct circuit connections that there's A, B, C, and D. If you read the words there, there's only the correction is in the first line there, the polarity and correct circuit connection testing. All the rest in black remains the same. Over the page, please. And the bottom ones now have been included into the polarity. So the correct circuit connection requirements that no protective earth conductors are connected in parallel with any neutral, and no short circuits between conductors, and no interconnections has been moved from just being purely and simply correct circuit connections into being the polarity and correct circuit connection thing. I think you'll find it'll be a lot easier for all you students at school. Next slide, please. I think it's tag team back to you, Gary.
Okay. Operation of RCDs. Within the testing, there's always been a requirement to test your RCD operation, and that can be done with a test button or an RCD testing device, testing unit. The difficult part of it is that we actually added an exception for Australia, which is in grey down the bottom, that if there were no supply available, then you don't need to do your RCD testing to check that it actually works within the installation. This is a bit crazy. We've had problems with certain jurisdictions in Australia that the electricians walked away from a job and not really done the compliance check for the RCD. From a safety perspective, it's imperative that you test on an installation that the RCDs operate correctly and do what they're supposed to do, which is to isolate your supply if in the case of a fault. So this will now make testings of RCDs on site a requirement. Now, this could be some of an issue in certain states, but I know in most states that I've heard that electricians are carrying around an inverter or even a gen set to provide power just while they do that test for the RCD. So it actually makes a lot of sense. If you're doing the job, you want to walk away, or you want your employee to walk away from that job that they've just done and know that everything works well. An RCD, as we all know, have reduced the amount of electrocution and the amount of shock dramatically over the last 20 or so years. And so we want to make sure that we keep testing these RCDs and make sure that a new installation does perform as it should do with an RCD. So we've deleted that exception as of this amendment. Next one.
Yep, back to me. Thanks, Gary. You didn't spend much time in the ring that time. Okay, this is a nice and easy one. In the Appendix C, we had the wrong table. Now, when you're going and looking into your document, there are two lots of steps. So all the steps in step number 1 are all okay, but when you get to step number 2, we've referred to the wrong table. We've corrected that, so that's the one at the bottom in red at the bottom now, where you refer back to table C.8 for the possible cable size. Nice and easy, and now I'll hand it back to Gary.
Okay, surge protection is Appendix F. Just an informative annex, gives you some information about surge protection. Basically, we've just had to reword the item A under that paragraph 122. So we've taken that grey bit out and replaced it with the fact that an SPD, surge protection device, shall be installed after the main switch, but prior to any RCD devices. Where the main switch is an RCD, then you refer to 1.2.4 within that annex. So there's just some advice to make it a little clearer about putting your surge protection prior to any RCD devices after the main switch. So next one. And this one's purely editorial. There was a wrong reference. It had 3.1.2 there for aerial conductors is actually 3.1 to 3.12. Move on, very simple. Now that basically takes us to questions.
Beautiful. So we did have quite a few come through, and perhaps I might have to go back through the presentation deck for some of them, but you guys just let me know when. Our first question comes in from Frank Cont. What is the final date for compliance for type A RCD?
That's 2 years after the amendment was published. The amendment was published at the end of March, if I'm right. Is that right, Keith? I think it was.
15th of, hang on a minute. Yeah, published the 30th of April, 2021. 30th
of April. So you've got till the 30th of April 2023 to have that right. As we said, the 2 years was to give suppliers and manufacturers that opportunity to clear their shelves so that when you went to pick up an RCD, which you would just go in and buy an RCD to go into a switchboard, you're probably not even thinking about type A or type A AC. It will just be changed. I can assure you that from a supplier's and manufacturer's perspective, this change is happening a lot quicker than 2 years.
Thanks, Gary and Keith. The next question from David is, will the AS NZS 3000 2018 wiring rules standard be amended to incorporate all the amendments? And if so, when will it be available?
I can answer if you like, Gary. It's out already. It is published. I actually have a copy already. It is available with Amendment 1 and Amendment 2 in it.
It's an interesting, I guess it's interesting that if you just take the amendments themselves, they should be free from the SAI Global or the publishing company. But if you do want the whole book again, you've got to buy the book with those consolidations in them.
Question from Andrew Whitmer. If you purchase a switchboard or control board from a manufacturer, should they provide certification that it complies with AS NZS 61439?
I'll jump into that one if you like. They should supply certification that it complies with either 61439 or 3439 at this stage.
Yeah.
Thanks, Keith.
And
I'm sorry.
I guess from a supplier's perspective or manufacturers, and now that we have a demarcation with the 125 amp and the 10 KA or the 10 KA, those boards under that rating, they're usually designed and manufactured based on 61439 or 3439. So you would be able to get some documentation from a reputable supplier about that. Certainly, once you get over the 125 amp and the 10 KA, that will be part of the requirement of 61439 that you have documentation from the manufacturer that board is compliant to that.
Question from Graham Burgess, thanks for that. And we might have to go back, but should clause 4.1.2 refer to XI and not IX? Do you want to take a scroll back?
We got an editorial problem.
I think we might have to. I'll quickly run through. Bear with me, everyone. Sorry. This one here.
Delete item IX. Oh no. From that perspective there, I believe that's probably terminology for when we do the amendment. When we ask the editors, we actually delete a clause that may be wrong and put in a new clause part. And it was IX, I believe.
No, we've actually, Gary, just quickly, if you have a look at the standard, it is XI, smoke alarms and fire detectors. We've just got it wrong in the presentation.
Well,
we've got it wrong in the presentation. Sorry.
That's fine. Let me move on. A similar one, I think, 4.3.1. So clause 4.3.1, does this include items like evaporative air conditioners that are supplied with a plug top?
Interesting one. I don't know if I've seen the ones with the plug top.
Gary, the use of a 413 is suitable for there. What we don't want is EPODs plugged into the 413 to plug in a couple of pieces of equipment like an exhaust fan and also the air conditioner as well. They're not to be used up in the ceiling space.
Yeah. Oh, okay.
Yeah.
This one here from Mark Oretti, I think he's pointed out that the Amendment 2 is available on text tree. I think there was a question earlier that asked where it was available. So thank you, Mark. Keep pressing on. So with respect to the generators, there's been more significant changes than just symbols. Switching of neutral at generator isolation switch has been removed. So not so much a question, but more of a comment. Anything to say back to that, guys?
I'd have to have a good look. I'll take that one on notice, Jess. If you could just take that one, I'll double check that.
Yep. Leave that here.
I'm looking at them now. I don't think we changed them. I'm looking in the new book. I'd have to bring out the old book too and have a squiz.
Well, we've got Frank's details, so we can get in touch with Frank for that one at a later date. How would you suggest to connect the genset / inverter safely to test an RCD installed at a property with no supply from the street?
Keith, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Yeah, that's regular, because essentially it's just connecting to the back of the switchboard with the active neutral, isn't it? But yeah, Keith, you might want to explain a little deeper on that.
It's at this stage of the game, because we've basically all states and territories, bar New South Wales, has got 6 months to comply with the standard or get used to the standard before it's mandated. We're working with that at the moment because, yes, you are correct. It could be, it is, or potentially a safety issue connecting supply to a switchboard for testing purposes because you're working with 240 volts. We're looking into that. Victoria will give some notification to this before the mandated date, hopefully sooner than later, but I really don't want to comment on that quite yet. There will be, I believe there's one manufacturer, and I believe there's probably two at the moment with specific test equipment, so you can do this without having to hook a generator or inverter up. But we'll wait. That'll come out in the long term or the near, hopefully.
Yeah, I think as Keith put it, the way the legislation is in Victoria does make it that question is quite pertinent and relevant. But I know that a lot of electricians nationally have just been connecting it up while they do the tests, so they would connect up as if they were running a supply, had a supply, and then they would remove the gen set straight after they've done the test, or the inverter. And I know there are people trying to work out how they can just plug into a socket outlet and actually provide power at this stage. But yeah, I think that'd be a good one, Keith, that you guys got to work on, especially for Victoria.
Yeah, we are.
Thanks, guys. The next one from Darren Cook is, if an A-type RCD is being used, can an IR tester set at 250 volts DC be used for the tripping test? Seems like we've got some good questions coming in.
Question, chats.
The question is, if an A-type RCD is being used, can an IR tester set at 250 volts DC be used for the tripping test?
I don't think it can be, because the type AC is a pure sinusoidal wave. The type A is sinusoidal plus pulsating DC. It's not until you get into the type B that you get a constant DC tripping guaranteed. So I know sometimes doing testing with your IR tester, they trip, but I wouldn't guarantee it as a test method, because it is pulsating DC and AC for the type A.
Okay. This one's directed towards Gary. So hi Gary, RCD testing, if no power is available on site, can't we test neutral to earth whilst carrying out polarity testing? I can read that one again if you like.
Yeah, which one is it?
So RCD testing, if no power is available on site, can't we test neutral to earth whilst carrying out polarity testing? That's from Bill.
I'm not sure. I guess that's one to take on note. I think we have to, as Keith said, the regulator in Victoria is having a look at this and how it's all going to go forward. There won't be any power, so if you do the polarity test, I don't know whether that's actually going to check your RCD, because you have to actually prove that it's actually broken, isolated, active neutral.
We might come back. So when we send this recording to everyone, we might come back on a couple of these questions, if that's okay with you guys. Yeah.
Yeah, just with that one on the generators, I've got both books in front of me, and the gentleman is correct. We did remove the switching of the neutral in the generator as a requirement, because it switched through the changeover device. Okay, so yes, the answer to that one is yes, the switching of the neutral has been removed in the new document.
Well, that was for Frank, so thanks for following that up, Roy. I'll move through. We've probably got time for what we have now. Have a question from Michael Weeks, directed at Keith. Is it prescribed work to test the RCD using a generator?
Good on you, Michael. If you're testing purposes, it is not prescribed work. It is testing, and I'll leave it there.
All right. We've got Shane Tynan looking for requirement regarding the like-for-like replacement of sauna heaters and steam generator equipment not protected by RCDs. It has been my thought that a D-curve RCD should be incorporated as part of the existing equipment replacement. Any thoughts on that? Very specific.
If it's like-for-like replacement, you don't have to go and put an RCD in front of it. If it's the same wattage and draws the same power and it's got the same specification, might be from a different manufacturer, you don't have to do anything. It's not a requirement to do that. So if you did want to put a D-curve, I mean, you could do that. If you want to talk to the customer and say it's a good idea to put this into a residential installation, even though it's a repair, that's all well and good, but it's not essential.
Gary, question from Devinder Singh. For RCD testing, is it required to test RCD with RCD tester with leakage, current rating and tripping time, or just push button testing is acceptable, or with RCD trip tester?
As the words actually do say, that you can use the push button, the test button facility to check it. If you want to go a little deeper and actually understand what you're doing, which gives you trip times and the current rating that it trips at, then you would use a tester. So as Roy was saying, if you decided as a business or a person that I'm actually going to record these results, the test button would be fine. You just say it works. But if you use an RCD tester, that actually gives you more information, more data to actually know where the installation is, or sorry, how the RCD is performing. So horses for courses, you don't have to use an RCD tester.
Thank you. Okay, so is from Matthew Busbridge, is replacing an air conditioner with a lower current required to have an RCD if one is not there? So is replacing an air conditioner with a lower current required to have an RCD if one is not there?
Look, I might jump into that one quickly. So what I understand of this question is if we're replacing an air conditioning unit and it's got a slightly lower current rating or wattage, but it's replacement, so you wouldn't have to put an RCD on that circuit because it's an existing circuit. It's only if you're increasing it that you would have to.
Yeah.
So this one came through the chat as well, of which I'll try and get to next. The chat's in a separate window. So the type of RCD on community lights, statement there.
Yeah, I saw that one, Jess.
Yeah, I'll look in the chat just quickly because it could very well be the same.
Yeah, that was about the community lighting. Actually, community lighting fits a non-residential.
Non-residential, so enables.
So if you think about it, if you've got community lighting, if it's in a park or a walkway or something like that, you wouldn't actually want it on RCD, to be quite honest, because you don't want that to trip and then have no light in that public access area or whatever, or a community park. So you could apply an exception, and that's why that comes under the non-residential.
So this is the last of the questions that we've got, and then I'll move over to that chat to work through those, which I don't think there's too many, but from Lucy regarding a smoke alarm. So is accumulated moisture a reason to make the smoke alarm beep? There is no fault with the product and there is no tripping circuit inside the switchboard.
Look, that's actually a product issue. and having come from Snyder, the other side, yeah, look, there are some issues that make smoke alarms beep, and it can be, firstly, the battery may be flat within that, or going flat. The other thing is you can actually get some sort of interference from like an EMC, electromagnetic, if you've got high power cabling near the smoke alarm. So there's a whole lot of reasons, and you have to actually talk to the smoke alarm manufacturer to get those answers. They need to have a look at that. And it usually comes back to filters within the smoke alarm that actually do their job. And so, yeah, you need to talk to the smoke alarm manufacturer.
You could also, if you purchase from any Middy's branch, you could also make your way down, and we can help you with that process as well.
Oh, sure. Yeah. And then they'll be on to the manufacturer.
Yeah. So
you're the middleman. You're going to help.
That's what we're here for, guys.
Facilitator, that's what it is.
That's it. I did say that was the last of the questions, but we've had 2 more come in. Are you gents happy to answer those ones before we move quickly to the chat? We're doing okay for time.
Yep.
All right. Lucky last 2. If the air conditioner's installation instructions require RCD, that's not a question, sorry. This is from Chris Long saying that if the air conditioner's installation instructions require RCD, yes, you need to install an RCD. We'll move on to Paul Kang.
I think that's not a bad one to remind people. If you have a look through the wiring rules, the manufacturer's instructions or installation instructions actually give you the details about how you should be installing that product or that system. You've got to follow it. So the wiring rules is the safest level, the lowest level for safety. And if a manufacturer decides they want to have another higher level set, then you should be following it.
Oh, great point there, Chris. Thank you. And Paul Kang has said, what do you do with a multi-head split system that has a 25 amp to 32 amp supply to the outdoor unit? Do you have to run 4mm cable to the indoor units, which only draw 1 to 2 amp? I hope I've pronounced that right.
Yeah. Again, that comes back to an installation, the manufacturer's instructions, but I can't see that you'd need 4 square mil, because I don't think the indoor gets much more than a control signal, as far as I know. Roy?
Yeah, could you read the question again, please, Jess?
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry. What do you do with a multi-head split system that has 25 amp to 32 amp supply to the outdoor unit? Do you have to run 4mm cable to the indoor units, which only draw 1 to 2 amp?
No, my understanding there would be that the going off to the internal units would be installation wiring, and you're allowed to break the gauge of installation wiring through appropriate methods. And having protection devices within the unit, which they quite often do have, you can break down to a smaller gauge going up to each of the head units. I think you'd agree with that, Keith?
That's my belief as well, yes.
Yes, yeah.
We've got Ben Carraro. When is there an exception that the neutral is not switched at genset on gensets above 1000 kVA?
I'm not too sure on the question there. The requirement to switch neutrals from generators, we're looking at in the new rewrite for generators. We don't particularly like the switching of neutrals for generators. We do have a requirement on the isolator located at the generator to switch all live conductors, which the neutral obviously is. But after that, we're looking very seriously at not switching neutrals, and the current 3010 doesn't say you cannot do it. It just doesn't give you much guidance on how to do it. So I'm not too sure what he's talking about with the 1000 amp one. Do you know that, Keith, or what?
I don't understand the question, really. Sorry.
Yeah.
So-
We could probably take that one on notice. Jess, I'll do some more research into that and get back to the gentleman.
Sounds like a plan, thank you.
Mhm.
I'll make a list of some of the questions we didn't get to. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. I had a really great question from someone in the chat, of which I said the recording would be made available, but it makes a lot of sense, seems logical to have the slides available too, for those that want to go through it as well. If there's no objections there, I think it's a great idea.
Yeah.
Yep.
Gary, you put the slides together. Are you happy with that, or?
Oh, sure. No, the more information we can put out there, just
Yeah.
that's no problem.
So I think, I obviously want to say on behalf of Middy's a big thank you to Roy, Gary, and Keith for volunteering their time today to go through this. There's been a huge want and a need for this, I think, from customers that have attended our info nights, have contacted Middy's. So we're really grateful for your time. And of course, to those that have joined today, we really appreciate you joining, close to 1,000 people, which has been incredible. I will say that we'd love to hear your feedback, or whether you'd be interested in doing something like this similar, or if there's a particular topic you'd like us to explore on this sort of webinar forum. Obviously, it's great to do in-person events, but we're all in a bit of trouble down in Victoria and New South Wales as well. So quite hard to organise, but I think it's seamless for people to log in and participate in the sort of format that we have today. So without any sort of further ado, I just want to thank you all, let you know that it will arrive, the slides and the recording will arrive in your inboxes in the coming days. And from everyone at Middy's, we hope you stay well and safe, as well as your families, and we thank you for your custom. So,
all right, see you later. Thank you.
Thank you very
thanks
much.
very much.
Talk to you
Appreciate it,
later.
guys.